A new era of Carmel football is upon us as the Greyhounds welcome back a familiar face. Returning to the head coaching position for the 2025 season and joining me today is head coach Kevin Wright. Coach, how are you doing today? And thank you for your time.
I'm great. It's just unbelievable to be back, and we had spring practice this morning. So, while most of you were sleeping, we were out working. I think we actually started doing drill work around 6:20. So, it's been a long day, but a fun day. And that's, again, why I'm in sweats and you look so good. But no, it's been good, and really enjoyed being back, and just excited to be able to coach football and, see guys progress.
Coach Wright played college football at Western Kentucky, started his coaching career at Frankfurt shortly after graduating, and since then has coached for numerous successful programs at both the high school and collegiate level, including Carmel from 2010 to 2014. Coach Wright, thank you for joining me today, and let's take it back to your high school days of playing wide receiver at Sheridan High. I understand your father, Bud Wright, coached you. He helped kickstart what has been an incredible career of yours. So to what extent has he influenced the coach you are today?
Well, I think that, we're all influenced by our parents. And, my dad has been at Sheridan High School for only 62 years. I think that, just growing up, and we grew up in a rural community, and I think the work ethic that you would see from him, but I think, and I had 4 siblings, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a 2-parent family. And, so I always tell people, whereas you would assume it would be the father that, had the most impact, the coach's wife is the one, who does, most of the dirty work, so to speak. So, I learned a ton from my mom just about, how to care about people. You learn the work ethic from your dad. So I really think it's a combination. And, I always tell, everyone that asks, when I proposed to my wife, my mom stepped in and said, I'd like to spend some time with her first to kind of give her an idea of what it's going to be like to be a coach's wife. And I think she tried to talk her out of it, but, I think that's probably part of the key to the success too, is, you see that family component, you see the work ethic, you see what it takes to be successful. And, you want to, I think you see that at Carmel a lot too. You got a lot of successful kids here who come from successful families. And so, you always want to carry on what you've seen, growing up as a child.
And playing for your dad in high school, do you ever feel as if, like, being your father and a coach, that he came down harder on you compared to other players, or did he keep it pretty level throughout the whole team?
No, that's a fact. He came down harder because he could. You think about 30 years ago, coaching was a little bit different. It was a little bit harder, so to speak, just in regards to, how coaches could deal with players. But when it's your dad, he's not very big, but at that point he still had the ability to pick me up, and shake me if I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted him to do. And I think one time I made the mistake of actually talking back to him, and, I don't think I've ever done that again. And, I think that's just kind of part of it. Like, and he wanted to just push me, and he wanted me to be successful. And, and ultimately I think that, when somebody cares about you, and I think that's easier to take coaching when they care about you. And in that case, it was my dad. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, like, I was the easy one, because I had to ride home with him,
Yeah. Looking back on your career, can you think of any standout moments, especially early on? When did you realize that it was realistic to one day be coaching programs such as IMG or coaching at a collegiate level?
Well, I mean, it's a small world, and my first job, was in North Central High School. I mean, and there was a guy named Roland Inskeep, that name may sound familiar to you, who hired me. And, I was planning to go to law school. I was not going to coach. And, I really, was go to law school, maybe be a graduate assistant. I was trying to figure it out. And he called me and said, hey, I can't guarantee you anything but an interview, but we've got an opportunity, to teach and coach. And, so, that really changed my career thoughts, and so I went to North Central, and, the first year there, I coached football. I went from football to girls basketball, coached girls basketball. And then my dad called me and said, hey, can you coach boys and girls varsity track? And then during the summer, I ran the weight room. So, it was one of those things where, I got my foot in the door and, really enjoyed just coaching kids and at North Central at that point, in the early 90s there, we had 3 or 4 kids and went on to be NFL players, but we were never able to get over the hump, but it was fun seeing guys develop and seeing guys come together and, so, I think, really the turning point then even in my career, because at that point I'm still thinking I'm still going to law school. My dad called and said, "Hey, there's a great opportunity for you to be a head coach." And I'm like, I'm 24 years old. And I'm like, "Well, where's that at?" And he said, "Frankfort High School." And I said, "The hot dogs?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why is it a great opportunity?" He said, "They haven't won a game in 3 years." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." He goes, "Yeah, you win one game, you've done more than what's happened here and happened there in 3 years." So yes, my first job was at a school with a mascot, which is still to be determined. At a program that was, hadn't won a game for 3 years. And, the very first game I coached was in what was the RCA Dome. And so we played the rival, the mighty Clinton Central Bulldogs. And, we beat Clinton Central 22-0. And the year before Clinton Central, I beat them 55-0. So, we had a 500 year, but, you really caught the fire again and thought maybe this is something that, I can do and be good at and try and achieve at the highest level possible. But, it really took to, I think like with a lot of people, it took to mid-20s to where I thought this is the career that's, I want to pursue.
So were there any specific moments throughout your football coaching career, such as sectional championship with the Millers or three-peating with Warren Central, where the IMGs started to come into picture or college coaching came into picture?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. Just, we had the success at Frankfort, and, I was there 1 year, and then I got a call from Noblesville just asking me if I would be interested in interviewing. And so I went and interviewed at Noblesville, and, I did not make the final cut. And, so as again, as things would have it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be here. And the next week I get a phone call, and it's a guy named Pete Smith ended up coaching basketball, I believe, here at Carmel High School, right? So again, small world, but Pete said, "Hey, we'd like for you to come in and interview Mr. Ford, who was the principal at the time. He didn't like the finalists that were chosen. He'd like to interview you." So I came in and interviewed with the principal at the time, Jack Ford, and he offered me the position. And similar deal. They were 1-9 the year before, so it was all about turning programs around. And so we did have some success. Now that took some time to build, at Noblesville, but again, just it showed me what could be done. And when we won the sectional championship there at Noblesville, I don't know, 97, 98, our goal was win the sectional, but we had to get through Carmel. So there was 2 years in a row where we actually beat Carmel. So you're building on the success. And then we played North Central in the sectional championship and won the first sectional that they'd ever won in the big school class. And, so now it's like, what's next, so that's kind of been, unlike my father, who's, really stayed in one place, I'm one of those people that's, probably look for the next challenge, and so you start to think, okay, if you can do it at Frankfort, you can do it at Noblesville, maybe there's other things out there. And at the end of the day, yes, my goal at that point was I want to coach Division I college football, and, when you're at schools like a Warren Central, which, I went to Louisville Trinity for a year, we were 11-1 and end up coming back here, the Warren job open. But then you start to think, I want to go to college, but, is the MAC or, a G5 school, as they would refer to it now, is that a better situation than being a head coach at a big time high school? And, I decided it wasn't, I decided that, if I had an opportunity, it was going to be, to go to some place I really wanted to go to, because I was going to have to move my family out of state. And then eventually I got an opportunity to go be the offensive coordinator at my alma mater, Western Kentucky. And when we were transitioning from FCS to FBS. So again, just very blessed, when the opportunities came and from the really from the Western Kentucky situation. Had back surgery. I was out for about 8 or 9 months. I came back to Indianapolis. Actually worked at Heritage Christian, for a year, and people don't know that. And then the Carmel job opened. And so, I took that. Coach Moriarty had come, really kind of turned some things around. And then, I was able to come to Carmel, which, I'd always thought as Carmel as being one of the pinnacles, in the state of Indiana. So, great opportunity for 5 years. We had, I think some pretty good success. And out of nowhere, I get a call from Bradenton, Florida about an opportunity to go someplace called IMG. So, situation after situation. Coach Allen, when he got the job at IU, he had been at Ben Davis when I was at Warren. So relationships matter, right? And so just very blessed. And then the opportunity to come back here. So, and I'm excited about it. Like, I tell people it's not you don't do this unless you're excited to do it when you get up in the morning.
Yeah, of course. So after coaching numerous sports, it sounds like, and a lot of programs, how would you describe your coaching style, what you focus on in terms of intensity, or just what you focus on in general, and how has that changed throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, when you first get into it, you love the strategic component, right? It's like playing chess. I'm going to beat that person. I'm going to find a way to win. I'm going to use a better strategy with what they have. And then as you continue down the path, you start to understand that culture beats scheme, so developing culture. And I think that's the thing that, every place I've gone, I think that it's been a situation where, we want to create a culture that we can all be proud of and that's special. And, the one thing I take the most pride in as a coach is the fact that it's not about number of games won or championships won. It's about, at the high school level, I've never, as a head coach, had a year where I didn't have more kids come out for the team than the previous year. And that's a statistic that, does not talk about me. It talks about the culture and all the people that you surround yourself with in the program, because it doesn't matter whether it's, 1995 and you're at North Central High School, or it's, 2025 at Carmel High School. Everybody wants to be part of something special, and it just so happens here, there's a lot of things that they can be part of that are special, but, that's something I think that culture is something that I think I've really grown to embrace and understand that important.
You've certainly displayed a winning culture at a lot of programs you've been through. Walk me through what it was like winning 3 straight state championships with the Warren Central Warriors, and what the culture in that program must have been like at the time.
Yeah, I mean, so the early part of my, I did not take over a program with a winning record, until I came to Carmel. So that was Frankfort, that was Noblesville. When I went to Louisville Trinity, they were 5-5, which is down for them. When I went to Warren, they were 3-7, the year before, so, my big thing was you walk in and, you look at the situation, and, it's not like high school's not like college. Like, the starting point is you surround yourself with, as many good people as possible. And I remember the principal at Warren, Tony Burchett, who I consider a mentor of mine, who actually coached in 84 and 85 when Jeff George was playing, and people don't know, but Jeff George is the only, guy from Indiana to ever be drafted number 1 in the NFL draft. But Jeff was playing, so he had a football background. He said, you do what you got to do, but I want you to give the guys on staff, who at that point were all teachers, which is unique, give them all 1 year. So I met with everybody, and I said, we're going to go around the room, and you're going to tell me why. Give me one reason why we can beat Ben Davis. And they struggled to give me, this is Warren Central, they struggled to give me one reason. They all gave me reasons for the most part why they couldn't. And so, it took me about 2 years to get the right guys on the bus and get them in the right seats. And, during that course, you start building, but, what people don't, we really started off this, just, hey, let's take a step on the mountain. The first step is have a winning record. The second step is win a sectional. We never lost a sectional game in the time I was at Warren. So obviously, the pinnacle then becomes, if you're winning a sectional, why can't we win the state? Well, to win the state, you got to beat Ben Davis again at that point. And so, one of the most intense rivalries I've ever been part of was Ben Davis and Warren, during that time period, because Ben Davis under Coach Dullahan and then Coach Allen, that was the pinnacle, and they had, basically had been very dominant. They were the first program to have a strength coach and really were cutting edge. And, they were great to me because I'd go over every time I got a job and I'd go see what they were doing. And they shared, maybe some secrets to their success with me, because that's what high school coaches do, right? I mean, there's no secrets, but, the reality of it is that, when we were close twice, you were 10-2, we were 11-1, and then we won that first state championship in 2003. And, it was, it was like, again, a celebration on the east side. And then you win again, and then you win again. And, when I left, we'd won 3 in a row, and the best team was coming back. But again, there was an opportunity for another challenge, and people thought I was crazy. But, it's not always about how many state championships you win. It's about, to me, it was about looking for challenges. And so it was a special time. And, I've been back the last couple of years for the reunions of those teams, and, just seeing those young men and what they've been able to achieve and where they're at in life. And, we had a special group, and, it's something that those are where kind of the aha moments where you're like, okay, this is why I do what I do, is when you get a chance to go back and see where people are at.
So it sounds like you largely built a lot of that culture up at Warren Central. What was it like coaching at Carmel only a few years later, taking down your former program in a state championship and bringing home a state championship for the Greyhounds?
Well, and I always use this analogy, perception is people's reality. And so I grew up in Sheridan, back in the single class basketball days. And so here's a tidbit. When's the last time Sheridan beat Carmel in basketball? Not going to tell you, but we beat them back to back at some point when somebody in this set was playing. Okay. So that was the pinnacle, but you have this idea, we got to go beat those guys, right? I mean, and then you go to Warren, you're like, we got to go beat those guys because, they got everything and we don't have much, right? So that's kind of like the from the outside looking in, Carmel kids are giving a lot. And then, when I got here, I never forget, went home and told my wife the first morning workout, I'm like, these guys will run through a wall. Now that was the first time I had inherited a team that had won, like Coach Mo had won, prior to. But at that point, I was like, man, perception is, my perception is not the reality, so you just change hats, and again, those relationships that you're building with the players and the coaches, the teachers, the administrators, those are things like, you can never have enough friends. You can never have enough close relationships. You can never be around enough good people. And, the Carmel family really embraced me, and I was thankful for that. And, just the 2011 team, I think we were 4th in the country and max preps at the end of the year. But, that's maybe, I think you think back on my coaching career, that year we end up 4th in the nation. We win the state, but we lost to Warren on a field goal, a 53-yard field goal at Lucas or downtown, wherever the stadium was at that point. And they were, we were down, so now how do you respond, and, we just the way Indiana is, it's a blind draw. At that point, we're in the same section with Warren. So we drew them at home round 2, and you're like circling it because being from Warren, I know the last place you want to play is Carmel. Okay. Just like the last place at Carmel, guys, you don't really want to go play at Warren because the atmosphere can be hostile. And our crowd was, it was unbelievable. Brandon Denning, who's gone on to do some great things in the field of education, was our quarterback. And, at the end of the game, not that I remember this or anything, but at the end of the game, Brandon has to go out. We're down a touchdown at the very end, and we're on the goal line. It's 4th and 1. So you don't remember this because you probably weren't born yet. But, Brandon has to come out for one play, but it's 4th and 1. I don't know what happened. I think maybe he got hit, and they made him go out. So Brandon Luger, who comes in, was unexpected to play, comes in. I said, just hand the ball off to our all-state tailback, Jalen Duncan. We'll get the first down. That's all you need to do. Brandon had other ideas. Brandon rode the ball, and he decided he saw green grass. He pulled it and walks in the end zone, and everybody goes crazy. And Brandon, I don't think even started his senior year, but, just the, being prepared, seizing the moment, to me, that's really, I think about that, when you start thinking about your career and the highlights and those things, having that kid and that group respond, to adversity, because Brandon was the leader. And when the leader's down, as you know, sometimes it's hard. They could have put their heads down, but, we had a great senior class, and, Brandon was a young kid. He comes in, makes a play. We end up beating Warren. And then, I believe when we played Penn, it was 50-0 at halftime of the state championship game. So that team was on a mission. But again, as I told our guys when I got back here, my last game at Carmel, we were 14-0 going to the state championship game, had beaten Ben Davis, who we played, lost to Ben Davis, haven't forgotten it. So, I'd rather, when my career is over at Carmel, I'd rather that last game be a win.
Yeah. Sounds like that fourth and most recent state championship obviously means a lot to you to this day. And you noted on how Carmel embraced you as their coach and how much that meant to you. That state championship certainly meant a lot to the city and to Carmel Athletics. Following the announcement of your return, Inskeep claimed, and I quote, "You bring a wealth of experience and success to our program. We're excited for him to work with our Greyhounds again." So what does support from the city and the athletic department like that mean to you as you start the next chapter in your Carmel coaching career?
Well, I think the big thing is I'm sitting in a situation where we had gotten let go at IU, and, I'm open to everything at that point, because, you kind of, the goal is to coach in the Big Ten, and, my first year at IU, at that point was the best season that IU had. It was the COVID year, and the one game we lost in the Big Ten was Ohio State, 42-35, at Ohio State, played in a bowl game, so, it's like, okay, what's next, and, I looked at the business world and just different things. And when Mr. Inskeep called, and we started having a conversation about possibly coming back, I talked to my wife and at the time, we're trying to figure it out as a family, and we came back up here and it's funny now, but, the indoor, this is, November, whatever it was, indoors behind us, and it's a nice day. It's a Saturday, and we start walking around and they're tearing down the stadium. I'm like, what about if we just come back and just rebuild this thing and make it better? And she's like, I haven't heard you talk like that for a long time. And I'm like, well, let's make it better. I mean, is there a better place to live? Now, Sarasota, Bradenton is a pretty nice place. I'm not going to lie, but is there a better place to live and, just enjoy everyday life and, have an opportunity to be successful? And the answer to that question was no. I mean, let's seize the moment. And so we decided then and there, if we get the opportunity, we're going to take it. And so, we were up here in an apartment. We just moved into an actual townhome. So we're happy. It's been a really, the first few months have been a lot of fun, just seeing old faces, meeting new people like yourself and the guys here that are just unbelievable, the things that you guys have done. And, knowing Jack Berry, for example, at the Daz Club, and a lot of the guys, Mr. Steele was on my staff, Mr. Quick was on my staff, like their department chairs, their administrators, or, they're still around. Coach Schwartz, Sid down in, I think in tech, he's a department chair down there. So, it makes you realize again how important surrounding yourself with good people really is. And, and I look at the staff I have right now. You got, Brent Ayers and Chris Perkins both played back then, and so I think that's important too when you're trying to show kids what's possible here, because when you think about it, the last couple of years, have been rough by Carmel standards, but you got guys that can talk besides the head coach, guys who are players here and then can talk about their tradition. And, I think that's really important. And so, it's been a good start. We got to keep getting better, but, I like the direction that we're going, and the guys have kind of embraced the idea of the culture that we want. And, so, excited for the season, excited to get going, but, I appreciate everything that people embrace me when I come back, and that means a lot.
Yeah, you've lamented now on like the community, the city itself, but from a football program standpoint, you've coached at numerous incredible programs, but what is it about Carmel that makes the Carmel football program so special?
Well, I think first and foremost, Carmel's good across the board, whether we're talking athletics or performing arts. So, it's not just the program, right, at Carmel High School. So, the guys that play on the football team are guys that, you gotta you gotta love football, because there's other opportunities to play in other sports and be successful. But there's nothing like, and I kind of laugh, like, we actually, while I was recruiting at IU, when I was at IU and we were recruiting, we came to a couple Carmel games, and my wife was like, this is like a college pregame, like tailgating, crowds, the band, like everything. So it's just a very special atmosphere and a very, very special opportunity for our players to be able to play big time high school football, to win on a high level, and then to go on and take that work ethic, those, relationship building skills, all those things that we talk about. And whether they go play college football or just go to the Kelley School of Business at Indiana, I think that anything's possible here. I don't care who you are. This is a place with resources and people that care, tremendous teachers, great administrators, the fact that we're sitting here and we're doing it, this is a whole student-led crew, right? This is a professional performance. So anything is possible here. And that's what I always tell parents, whether you play football or not, if you're thinking about going to Carmel, it is what you make it. And very few schools can say that they have that ability when a young man or young woman enters the 9th grade. But Carmel High School, anything's possible.
With the 2025 season right around the corner, how has spring training started off? How's the intensity been? How's the chemistry look within the team? And have you already started building good relationships with a lot of the players?
Yeah, I mean, the relationship piece, so I chose, I could have started right before the end of first semester, and I chose not to start because I want to spend that time, and I talk with every single coach, every single person that was associated with the staff, and just to kind of get their input and feedback. And, amazingly, enough, I mean, everybody for the most part wanted to stay. They wanted to be a part. And so, you check that box off. And then just being in the weight room and creating excitement, challenges, APC first period on Gold Days has been a lot of fun. We post the challenges, but the kids have bought in and the coaches are buying in. So now you get a chance to go out. And I love the fact we have spring practice, even though it's not padded, but we have the spring practice. So you're right. You're laying the foundation. And you mentioned something, practice tempo. I'm a high energy guy, and I get excited. I told our people the other day, I can't be the most excited person out here at 6:15 a.m., but I know we only get so many opportunities to practice. So it's been great to lay the foundation. We're still learning how to practice. We're learning how to coach practice because I'm like, guys, I'm talking to the coaches. You better get in shape because boom, boom, boom. We're working off that clock, and you got this amount of time to get it done, and it's enough time, but we want high tempo, high intensity. I don't want you out there all day. We're going to teach off tape. We're going to use, we're putting $12,000 to $15,000, of money that we've raised through our fundraiser into video equipment, and updating everything so that, we have that technology and we have the resources that we can teach off tape and off different, methodologies that are used at the Division I level, and again, resources, right? But I'm excited, man. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm excited. Again, I was up early this morning and, when we put pads on and we can really find out what we're all about, I think that's when the kids they'll take it to the next level. But, they've been awesome. I mean, they understand, hey, this is the standard. Now, not everybody's meeting the standard all the time, but that's a process. And, if you don't meet the standard, there's consequences. And I always say voices and choices, right? So you surround yourself with good people, that they're telling you the right things, and, good things happen. You make good decisions. And right now they have the choice to put into it everything that they want to get out of it. And that's all of us. And, but again, anything's possible here. And my expectations are no different than what they were the first time I was here. Number one, we want to have a winning season. Number two, we want to win the sectional, because if you win the sectional, anything is possible. And number three, we want to win the state championship. Those are always going to be our three. You've got to get the first one, check the second one to get to the third one. But, as soon as they start believing in the process, which I think that they're, it's gaining momentum. I think the community's starting to get a little bit excited. As we get closer to football season, I think they'll get really excited. We're going to go to Zionsville and scrimmage. The first opportunity where everybody will see us live. It's just a scrimmage. And then, we're going to go play Fishers at Fishers on the road. It's a hostile environment over there. I mean, I've gone over there. Actually, the guy who was a principal, Mr. Urban, is now moved to central office, but he was one of the kids that got thrown in the back seat. His dad coaches my dad for 35 years. So he created a great environment. We just have to match that with our fans and so hey, what's better than going to Fishers in a rivalry game? Cause we're everybody's rival, and then we got our first home game against Westfield, and so I told our guys, you got two opportunities to get this community on fire for football again, right out of the gate. And what's better than having those rivalries? I'm going to tell a story. I know it'll probably get me in trouble, but, it's guys, I get solicited from emails and guys are trying to sell me stuff. And, so this guy, I'm not going to mention who it was, but he's going to teach me how to, he's going to give me the secret sauce to develop quarterbacks. Right. And so he sends me an email and I kind of respond and I forget about it because, it is what it is. It's a process. And then he sends me the next email and he says, if you give me 20 minutes, I can help you beat Westfield for the next 10 years. And I thought about that for a second and I emailed him back and I said, I'll give you 10 minutes if you can tell me how many times Westfield ever beat Carmel in football. And his next email was, I'm sorry for being so direct. I just, wanted to get you online. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you do your homework next time you call because we have tradition. And I know, I very well know what the score was last year and the last time and all that. This is not last year. This is not last time. Okay. So buckle it up. Let's go. Let's have fun. We've got some, we've got some, again, we got to get better, but there's so many opportunities on our schedule, to play great games. And that's why you should want to be a Carmel football player, a Carmel football fan, because you're going to Fishers, you're hosting Westfield. And then, oh, by the way, we got to go play Centerville, Ohio, which is a, big, and then we're going to go down to Louisville Trinity and, you close out with Ben Davis and Lawrence and Warren and, there's no off weeks, but that's what you signed up for, right? That's what you signed up for, So, if you don't want to play big time football, then go to Guerin.
Yeah, you lamented on the three biggest goals for this season. You lamented on the three biggest goals for this season. You seem to be all in with it this year, but obviously there are challenges within every football season. It's got to be in the back of some of the guys' minds. 12 losses in the last two seasons. In your 5-year stint, the program only lost 11 games. So how do you get over some of the challenges that you will face? Nothing in the way of getting to your three goals.
One step at a time. It's already started. And no offense to the Guerin people. But Coach Dilly's a great guy. He really is. But reality is this, it already started. It already started. And, I don't care. The past is the past. You get one 2025 season, so, the reality is what we do, what we've done from January until game one against Fishers, that's going to show, but, regardless of what that outcome is, like I told them, the great thing about football in Indiana, and you can argue it both ways, but you're going to make the playoffs. So the goal is just win the last game. Win the last game. right? So the reality is it could be a step-by-step, take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, the schedule is, it's a difficult schedule, but it's no more difficult than playing in the Big Ten or what have you. That's it really, there's a situation where, every week guys are going to get opportunities, because it is truly, a next man up. It's a long season, but, if we can make strides, throughout the course of the season and get ourselves to the point where you get a bye week now right before the playoffs, where we have 2 weeks to prepare for that playoff run, then I think we can make good things happen, but really excited about the start. We do have, I think this is the smallest senior class that they've had in years. I was trying to do some history on that, just in regards to numbers. But numbers, like I told our guys, you can only put 11 on the field at a time. Last time I looked. So, we're going to find the best 11 we can get out there. They're going to compete, next man up, and it's a step-by-step process. But like the good thing is, you mentioned the past. I don't think about the past. I don't think about the past. I do think more about, at times, to your point, the 11 losses than I do the all the wins, because I can remember those. But you know what? We will get to a point where, we will be competing for state championships again, just like we should be. When that is, like I told our guys, that's kind of up to us, coaches, players, and really community, because there is nothing. And I've been, at Carmel basketball games. I've been at Carmel football games, baseball games. Like, there is nothing like when the crowd comes out on a Friday night in this town, forget about Texas. Friday Night Lights is as good as it gets right here. And, so they need to appreciate that, because people, most people never get that opportunity, right? I mean, unless you go play at least mid-major college football, to go to a stadium like Carmel's and have it filled with the stands and people out tailgating and all those things. And people don't get those opportunities. So, I talk too much. I'm excited about being here. I'm excited about the opportunity. And again, full circle, for this conversation, I love challenges. So, we're coming back. I know the record. I know what the record was. It's 3-7. You know what the record was when I went to Warren? Like I told you, it was 3-7, and, so step by step you build it. And, if you're afraid, don't get on the bus.
Coach, thanks again for joining me today. I've had a blast. You have been incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, that was head coach of Carmel football for 2025, Coach Kevin Wright. The Greyhounds look forward to kicking the season off come mid-August of 2025. For the Greyhound Media Network, in association with Hounds HQ, I've been Josh Melby.